starting with number 1 Brewster F2A Buffalo, USA 1940. The F2A Buffalo was meant to be a modern carrier fighter, but pilots quickly discovered it was a death trap. The airframe was structurally weak, with wings that flexed dangerously under stress, and the fuselage lacked rigidity during combat maneuvers. At Coral Sea and Midway, American pilots reported the aircraft was slow, unmaneuverable, and fell apart under G-forces. Many never returned. Finnish pilots using the same aircraft achieved success, but American and British pilots consistently reported it was inferior to Japanese opponents and fundamentally unsafe. 2. Blackburn Rock, Britain 1940. Designed as a 4-cannon fighter, the Rock was fatally heavy. Its turret design meant the pilot could not fire forward, forcing head-on attacks to be avoided completely. With a maximum speed of only 238 miles per hour, it was slower than many bombers it was supposed to intercept. The aircraft was underpowered, sluggish, and pilots feared its poor climb rate and handling. It served briefly before being relegated to target towing, where it finally found purpose as a static platform rather than a fighting machine. 3. Ferry Battle, Britain 1937. The ferry battle looked modern, but was fundamentally underpowered. With only 1,030 horsepower driving a heavy frame, it could barely climb with a full bomb load. During the 1940 Battle of France, entire squadrons were sent against German positions with minimal fighter escort. The results were devastating. Of 136 battles deployed, only 66 returned. Pilots called it a flying coffin. Slow, vulnerable, and impossible to defend, the battle became synonymous with futility in aerial warfare. 4. Arado AR-232 Germany, 1943. The AR-232 was a transport aircraft with an innovative design but catastrophic flaws. Its pod-mounted landing gear created massive drag, severely limiting performance. The engines were unreliable, and the fuselage was difficult to pressurize. Structural issues plagued the design from the start. Only 21 were built before the program was abandoned. Pilots reported it was unstable, underpowered, and prone to mechanical failure. It never achieved the cargo capacity intended and became another symbol of misguided German engineering late in the war. 5. Caproni CA-309 Italy 1939. Intended as a reconnaissance aircraft, the CA.309 was underpowered and structurally questionable. Its design relied on outdated concepts, with poor aerodynamics for speed and insufficient armor protection. Italian pilots reported it was slow, vulnerable to enemy fire, and mechanically unreliable. Engine failures were common, and forced landings in hostile territory ended many missions. Only a handful saw service before the type was abandoned as impractical for modern aerial warfare. 6. Block MB-170, France 1940. The Block MB-170 reconnaissance fighter was built on the assumption that speed alone would ensure survival. However, its engines were chronically unreliable, and structural fatigue cracked the airframe prematurely. The cooling system overheated regularly, forcing pilots to ditch or limp home. Only 150 were delivered before production ceased. Pilots feared engine failure over enemy territory, knowing they would have no chance of gliding to safety. It represented French aviation's struggle to compete with German technical advances. 7. Macchi C-200 Italy, 1939. Italy's Macchi C-200 was fast but fatally underpowered. With only 870 horsepower, it was outclimbed and outmaneuvered by contemporary Allied fighters. The undercarriage was weak and prone to collapse on rough airfields. Pilots complained of insufficient range, poor climb performance, and inability to sustain combat against better-equipped opponents. While some experienced Italian aces achieved kills in the aircraft, average pilots found it inadequate. The design proved Italy could not match the engineering standards of more industrialized nations. 8. Fiat CR-42, Italy, 1939. The CR-42 was a biplane in a monoplane war. By 1940, it was already obsolete, yet Italy had no replacement and continued building it. Slow at 267 miles per hour, outgunned and outmaneuvered by every modern fighter, Pilots flying the CR.42 had almost no chance against Spitfires or Hurricanes. The wooden fuselage was vulnerable to incendiary ammunition. Entire squadrons of CR.42s were slaughtered when encountered by modern opposition. It represented a nation producing aircraft that belonged to a previous decade of warfare. 9. Polikarpov I-16, Soviet Union, 1934. The I-16 was revolutionary in 1935 but became a liability by 1941. With the German invasion, Soviet pilots flew aging I-16s against modern Bf-109s. The airframe was fragile, the cockpit lacked armor protection, and pilots were often inexperienced. Loss rates were catastrophic. The stubby fighter could not compete in dogfight performance at altitude. Thousands were lost in the opening campaigns, many to mechanical failure as much as enemy action. Pilots transitioning to newer types were reluctant to fly the I-16 again. 10. Fokker DXXI, Netherlands, 1939. The Dutch Fokker DXXI was a competent fighter, but arrived too late and in insufficient numbers. When Germany invaded in May 1940, only 27 were operational. The aircraft's wooden fuselage caught fire easily when struck by machine gun fire. Structural cracks developed quickly under combat stress. Pilots reported the cockpit was cramped and visibility was poor. During the brief Dutch campaign, losses mounted faster than new aircraft could be delivered. The DXXI represented Dutch aviation's inability to sustain modern air defense. 11. Bristol Bolingbroke, Canada, 1939. The Canadian Bolingbroke was a variant of the Blenheim with endemic structural problems. The fuselage developed stress fractures under vibration from the mercurial engines. Cooling systems failed in tropical operations. The landing gear was weak and collapsed on rough airfields. Crash rates exceeded combat losses in some squadrons. Pilots reported the cockpit was poorly heated, visibility was limited, and control response was sluggish. Operating in the Pacific against Japanese fighters, the Bolingbroke suffered devastating casualties with minimal operational success. 12. Vickers Warwick, Britain, 1942. The Warwick was designed around the Rolls-Royce Vulture engine, which was cancelled before the aircraft was built. Engineers then retrofitted it with inferior Rolls-Royce Griffon engines, forcing compromises throughout the design. The aircraft was overweight, underpowered, and aerodynamically inefficient. Pilots complained of poor climb rate, sluggish handling, and unreliable engines. Only 167 were built before the program was abandoned. The Warwick became a case study in poor project management, an aircraft that was fundamentally broken from conception due to engine change decisions made after design was complete. 13. Yokosuka D4Y Comet, Japan, 1941. The D4Y was Japan's attempt to create a modern dive bomber, but the Aichi D3A proved superior in combat. With unreliable Daimler-Benz engines that overheated constantly, the D4Y suffered mechanical failures at critical moments. The fuselage was lightly built and vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire. Pilots reported the aircraft was difficult to control in steep dives. Compared to American SBD Dauntless aircraft in the same role, the D4Y was less reliable, less survivable, and marginally less effective. Many losses were attributed to engine failure rather than enemy action. 14. Savoia Marchetti SM-79, Italy, 1936. Despite some pilot praise, the SM-79 was outdated as a torpedo bomber by 1943. The airframe was primarily wood and fabric, vulnerable to modern anti-aircraft fire. Defensive armament was weak and awkwardly positioned, leaving the aircraft exposed. Against modern fighter opposition and concentrated flak, loss rates climbed toward unsustainable levels. Pilots who survived multiple missions reported the aircraft's poor durability and inability to absorb damage. The SM.79 was kept in service not because it was effective, but because Italy had nothing better to replace it with. 15. Junkers K-47, Germany, 1938. The K-47 trainer was structurally flawed from the beginning. The airframe was prone to vibration-induced cracking, particularly in the wing root. Cooling system failures were common. students learning to fly suffered accidents that were often attributed to the aircraft rather than pilot error. Instructors reported the K-47 was more dangerous than enemy action, a claim few training aircraft could make. The aircraft was withdrawn from service early when these systemic problems became undeniable and accident investigations revealed structural defects that could not be economically repaired. 16. Caproni CA-310 Italy 1935. The CA-310 reconnaissance aircraft suffered from chronic engine unreliability and poor structural integrity. Pilots reported the airframe vibrated excessively at cruise speed, causing pilot fatigue and reducing accuracy for reconnaissance missions. The engines were underpowered and prone to overheating. The aircraft was slow enough to be caught by modern fighters, but not fast enough to outrun them. Only a few dozen saw operational service before the type was abandoned. It became known among Italian pilots as a liability rather than an asset. 17. Blériot Methodist, France 1940. This reconnaissance aircraft was underpowered and vulnerable in every dimension. The engine reliability was questionable, and the airframe flexed excessively during flight. Pilots reported inadequate range and poor altitude performance. Against enemy fighters, it had no defense except speed, which it lacked. Production was minimal and operational deployment was brief. The aircraft exemplified France's struggle to produce modern combat aircraft in the late 1930s and early 1940s, a period when industrial capacity could not match design ambition. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more military history content. And if we missed anything or made a mistake, let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next mission.